Today we have Dr. Chris Kenobi. He's an ophthalmologist, and we are going to talk about some fascinating information relating to seed oils. We have this trend of omega 6 fatty acid seed oils, and it's been trending like crazy high. Can you tell us the relationship between the trend of the consumption of seed oils compared to sugar? Because people think that no, sugar is trending going up, and that's the culprit, but I don't think that's true.
First of all, thanks for having me on, Eric. Um, and yes, so this is the work that I've been doing for the last about 13 years, deeply investigating seed oil, the industrial seed oils, and their connection to overweight, obesity, diabetes, and almost all this chronic disease. And this is what you just mentioned. I'm so glad you brought this up first. I'm looking here because I'm going to try to give you the exact data on this to answer this question. So people say, yes, they think sugar is the driver of all of this. And I am entirely convinced that the opposite is true. Not that sugar is healthy. It's definitely a nutrient deficient food, but let me get right to this data so I don't waste anybody's time. So I want to give you the most compelling evidence right off the bat is so most of our sugar consumption and everything I will say or mention will come from published evidence. So most all of our sugar consumption in the United States, which we've published and Stefan Guillenet has published, the increase came before 1922. So by 1922, we were already at 473 calories worth of sugar. And up to 1987, that barely changed. It went up to 497 calories. So, right, 24 calories difference, I think that.
From 1920 to 19...
From 1922 to 1987, yeah, sugar consumption was a flat line. And you'll see the data if you bring this in this graph that I'll send you. But during that time, so we've looked at obesity, and obesity was 1.1% in men age 18 to 80 in the late 19th century. That's Scott Allen Carson's work. So and then the next data was 1960 for obesity, which was 13%, 13.4 basically. And so we interpolate the data between those. So that's done through Excel. Anyway, so obesity was 2.95% in 1922. But it increased to 18.6% in 1987. So obesity increased over sixfold, while the sugar changed virtually not at all. It went up 5%. So this is a 65-year period of time. So if you're going to say sugar is the driver of this, how do you account for this? Because this is a 65-year period of time in history where we know sugar basically didn't change. Now it's gone up on either end of those years somewhat. We can get into more detail about that. So let's talk about the vegetable oil. So the vegetable oil introduced in the United States in 1866 has climbed all the way through 2010. So we went from 0 to 80 grams per person per day by 2010. And in 1922, the vegetable oil consumption was 78 calories per person per day. And that increased but to 1987 to 497 calories.
So just to kind of recap that data,
yes.
We're talking about, if you type in with ChatGPT about seed oils, it says, oh yeah, the average person has about 20 grams. No, it's 80 grams, which is basically about, 1/3 of our calories, isn't it? We're
yes.
almost like 25%, or 1/3 of our calories,
yes.
which is about a half of a cup. No, is it a third of a cup? It's a lot of seed oils.
Yes, it is.
It's not this 20 grams.
Between 1922 and 1987, sugar went up 5%. Vegetable oils went up 605%. God. Obesity increased 6.3-fold, or 532%. Wow. This is a 65-year period. And if you want, I could mention the evidence on diabetes. It's even more compelling, the increase in diabetes during this period. Do you want me to mention that?
Yeah, because people, I don't think people realize the how a fat, an oil, can cause diabetes, because they're always thinking blood sugars, but
Right.
I'm sure you can tell us like what's going on there.
Right, we can get to that. So the evidence on diabetes. So diabetes was so it's incredibly rare in 1890. This is published by Sir William Osler. Diabetes affected 0.0028% of the population. Now it rose all the way to 13% of the population by 2016. That is a 4,643 fold increase in diabetes. But let's just talk about, let's go back to 1922 to 1987. So we're looking at the exact same time frame we were looking before. Diabetes increased from about 0.09% in 1922 to 2.6% in 1987. It's gone up way, a whole lot more since then. How big of an increase is this? 2,800% increase in diabetes, a 29-fold increase during this 65-year period. So obesity went up 6-fold, diabetes went up 29-fold during this 65-year period when sugar did not change. So you just did, and I've got this evidence all over many other countries all over the world. It is everywhere I look. So far, I'm seeing evidence like this where you've got sugar and even carbohydrates flat or going down even. And the data gets more interesting if you look more recently, since 1999, that sugar's a bit on the decline while our obesity and diabetes rates have escalated exponentially.
It's day coincidence. I mean, when you analyze data, you want a trend, you want to look at comparison from one date to another, and this is smoking gun, and this is it.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So basically, when someone consumes seed oils, and of course, they call them vegetable oils.
Mm-hmm.
They even have pictures of vegetables, right? So you have these wonderful vegetables, but those are not in here. And it's heart. They actually can put heart healthy. We'll get into that. What's the mechanism causing diabetes in a kind of a simple way? How would you explain that?
Yeah, the very simple one sentence answer is that they're driving mitochondrial dysfunction.
Okay.
So the way that if we get into a little bit more detail is that the seed oils that are rich in omega-6 fats accumulate in our body fat, and these omega-6 fats and omega-3 they're polyunsaturated, so they're prone to oxidation. And so when these fats they accumulate in your body fat, then they're prone to oxidation, which inside the body, as you always say, it's very equivalent to rusting. And inside the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of our cells, there is damage to what's called a cardiolipin molecule, which ultimately is an important part of the electron transport chain.
There's something that it targets specifically in the mitochondria as this fat is being turned into energy and into the storage of ATP. Are you saying that? So, well, first of all, can we use this oil as energy?
Yes, absolutely.
We can.
We burn it. Yes.
Okay. So, but in the process, because it is the way it is, it basically damages something in our mitochondria, which then doesn't allow us to make the final product of energy.
Well, it's not in the process of burning the omega-6s. It's the fact that they're incorporated into these structures, these molecules,
okay,
and in the cardiolipin, and then they become oxidized because they're prone to be, they're subject to attack by free radicals.
So do they go into the membrane?
Yes, and then that membrane becomes leaky, and that inner mitochondrial membrane, and it leaks the hydrogen protons, which have to create a gradient in order to.
So let me just unpack that a little bit, because that's a little complex.
Yes.
So if you take the membranes around, I have a cell. We have a membrane around the cell. It's this outer cutting, and then on the inside of the cell, where there's a mitochondria, there are these little things right here, and they have membranes around them, little saran wrap type things. if you even stretched out, I don't know if you've ever calculated the surface area of just the cell membrane.
Hmm.
Um, if you take the number of cells and you stretch them out, the surface area comes to 90 acres, which is like, what? So there's this huge surface area. And this is how the mitochondria makes energy, because it starts to creates this difference with certain things on one side versus another, kind of like a battery, and then you have voltage and this whole thing. So that membrane is essential for creating electricity and power to be able to store energy. So,
Right.
so in other words, this fat gets into that membrane, and now it kind of starts leaking,
Hmm.
and then starts now we lose the power. It's kind of like having a car and you loosen one side of the bolt on the frame. It's like now we don't have that stability, right? It's just like flying all over the place. And
Yeah.
okay,
Great analogy.
interesting,
Right.
interesting.
And then I'll just mention too that the accumulation of these omega-6 fatty acids in our bodies, they ultimately drive not only this pro-oxidative environment, but it's also pro-inflammatory. It's
Mhm.
directly toxic through what are called advanced lipid oxidation end products, and it's nutrient deficient. You don't get any vitamins A, D, or K2 in the vegetable oils, no matter even the good ones. You don't get any vitamins A, D, or K2. So I always say these are the four pillars of hazard, and you put these together, and you just have the recipe for metabolic disaster and physical degeneration. So back to, well, what's driving obesity? Well, part of it is that you've disabled or caused dysfunction in the mitochondria, and you can't burn fuel properly, and
So
so then your energy consumption, that your energy production in your own body goes down. And at the same time, you want to eat more when you consume the vegetable oils.
you're
This is
probably
all part of
trying to get more energy because you're not making energy.
it. Absolutely.
To talk about the this mitochondria, we have a little assembly line of taking this food. And you have the glucose, the fats, and the amino acids. It's going through this assembly line, this factory, and it's extracting energy or called electrons right from there, and then other things it's extracting. But in school they don't really teach you. There's like 8 different steps, but they don't really tell you or emphasize that the cofactors to allow from one enzyme to go to the next. So those are all vitamins and minerals and things like that. So
Right.
I think what you're saying is that when you consume something in a refined form like this, you're not going to get the nutrients. So now the body has to pull from reserve, from creating deficiencies as you consume this. The same thing with, like, even if you did sugar, but you're creating deficiencies as you're burning the fuel. And then when you run out, now we have a problem because now these enzymes can't work. And then but this actually lodges into the membranes, right? It actually gets stuck in there for
Exactly.
some time.
That is such a great point, Eric, because so many people just overlooking the fact that especially we're so deficient in minerals, and these minerals, as you said, they're the cofactors of all these enzymes. If you can't run these enzymes, it's just like, as you use an analogy about a car. Well, if parts of your engine are not functioning, there's going to be an overall problem with power output, and then all sorts of things start failing. And in our bodies, this is where we start gaining weight. We start becoming insulin resistant, which means that your body doesn't respond to insulin, then your glucose goes up, and you're just poisoning yourself with
Mm.
these. These are what I call chronic metabolic biological poisons. Short answer is these are poisons.
When seed oils were first introduced into the diet, I think, weren't they? I think in the book, if I remember correctly, they were kind of like, well, what are we going to do with this waste product because they're using it for something else? Oh yeah, let's put it in the food supply. I mean, what happened at that point?
Yeah, so well, cottonseed oil was the first
Mm.
manufactured seed oil in the United States. We didn't up through 1865. There wasn't any seed oils in the food supply. There was a fraction of a gram of olive oil available. Almost no one had access to olive oil in the United States, some in California. But anyway, so the cottonseed oil was initially, before it was in the food supply, it was used as machine oil and lamp oil primarily. Then it was used as fertilizer, and then as cattle feed. But right in there, as they started using it as fertilizer and cattle feed, they decided that they wanted to sell it as food. And Americans didn't want any part of that because they knew it as machine oil and lamp oil. I mean, it'd be like, giving us motor oil as food and saying, here you go, eat this. And they didn't want any part of it. So manufacturers were not deterred. They just decided to start adulterating. Well, first they mixed the seed oils, the cottonseed oil, with butter to make margarine. They called oleomargarine back in that day. And then that began to work. So then they began to adulterate olive oil with it. And they sent huge amount, I think it was 55,000 barrels of so-called olive oil to Europe. And the French made complaint in 1880 because they knew just by the taste it was not olive oil. Mm-hmm. And that it was like half or something like that vegetable oil. And then eventually, by 1909 or in the early 1900s, Procter & Gamble began to produce Crisco trans fats, which is created by bubbling hydrogen gas through this cottonseed oil at that time in the presence of a nickel catalyst. And so they produced this product that looked kind of like lard, and that's what the goal was. So the whole goal with these was to make money. It wasn't because they were healthy. The goal was to make money. It was to outsell butter and lard with these oils somehow. And that's what they did. And they were extremely successful. And there was a lot of money in it. So we got cottonseed oil initially. And then in 1909, soybean oil entered the food supply. And then we got all the rest. So now today we've got soybean, corn, canola, cottonseed, rapeseed, grapeseed, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, sesame, and peanut oils. Those are my list of sort of the worst that now account for, as of 2010 anyway, 80 grams per person per day, which we talked about earlier, is 720 calories worth, 32% of U.S. caloric consumption. So even if you there's going to be a little bit of plate loss there. So it's at least a fourth, if not a third, of the American diets coming out of these gigantic factories that look like petroleum refineries.
And then parallel to that campaign, they have to invalidate the saturated fats.
Yes.
And I think it's fascinating to me when you look at any type of junk food, right? Whether it's this or the goldfish, or even used to be my favorite. If you look at these, they say, well, saturated fats are junk foods. They're in the junk. No, they're not. I actually looked at all these, and there's very little saturated fats. It's all unsaturated fats, which is fascinating to me because that's kind of like a downplayed point that ultra-processed food calories are just a tremendous amount of unsaturated fats, and people think, oh, that must be healthier, but no.
It's just exactly. It's just the opposite. They're very, very unhealthy. And yes, all of the processed foods are using seed oils. You try to find a processed food that has butter or lard or beef tallow in it. You just will hardly ever find any. So there's, I don't know how many, tens of thousands, if not maybe hundreds of thousands of processed foods and restaurant foods that are all laced with, they're just loaded with vegetable oils.
So when my wife, she cooked something, like shrimp, and there was olives in there and feta cheese, and I ate it. I didn't sleep that night, and the next morning I'm like, I normally sleep good. What's going on? So I went to see where she got those olives and that feta cheese. It was in a container filled with, I think it was canola oil. I'm like, not even olive oil. I'm like, canola. I just basically consumed probably a half a cup of canola oil, and I'm like, wow, my body does not do well on that stuff.
Yeah.
but they hide it in so many different products, even in, you would think to be olive oil in there, but there's not. And even like when you buy feta cheese in these little glass bottles,
Mhm.
and you go like, wow, look at, see. So in other words, you have to read the labels. You have to, restaurants, you can't really, you'd have to ask them what oils, but you get, people need to start, reading labels.
Yeah, you have to be extremely vigilant in order to get seed oils out of your diet. So if you eat in restaurants or you eat processed foods, it's all danger zone because they're generally just loaded with the vegetable oils. And people are very confused that so many people will say, well, I don't put any vegetable oils in my food. And you don't need to. You can get your 80 grams a day without ever buying a bottle of vegetable oil. You just eat processed foods and you eat restaurant foods and you'll have it. You'll get that
Yeah.
much.
I was at the health hacking event a couple weeks ago, and someone said, let's go to this restaurant that's pretty good. And I noticed that they emphasize they don't use seed oil. So I'm like, I have to get their business card to find out. Wow. I'm like, tell people to go there. But I think what I want to do is start promoting or recommending restaurants that don't give these seed oils, because I think that would be a completely new thing that I would love to go to. And you could go there and know that everything all on the menu is no seed oils, because it's so insidious in our food supply. This is
Exactly.
crazy.
And there's actually a couple of apps, or at least one. I think there's two apps now that um, will direct people to restaurants that do not use seed oils. And
Really?
unfortunately, Eric, I don't know the name of those
Okay.
apps. Um,
I'll find them
but
and put them in the description.
yeah, those would be excellent for people to find some of those restaurants. There's precious few restaurants that don't use seed oils, but there are it's they they are learning this from us. They're getting it from people like me and you.
So I guess I didn't know this, but you clarified something. In the fat cell, there's a lot of saturated fat, there's cholesterol. I did not know that these polyunsaturated fats um, went into the fat cells, and I didn't know that we can actually even burn them. I guess
Mm-hmm.
we can, but with a package, with a price to pay.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
I mean, ultimately, with these fats from the omega-6 and omega-3, they're meant to be in very specific places in our body. But if you just eat them in overload, which we do when we're consuming seed oils, they do, as I mentioned, they accumulate in our body fat and in our cell membranes and intermitochondrial membranes. They're accumulating everywhere that you have fat, in proportion to the amount that you ate. And the half-life of these fatty acids in your body is 600 to 680 days. So you can round it off, it's about 2 years. So when people quit consuming vegetable oils, it will take about 3 years to get those entirely out of your body. That's how long it'll
Well,
take.
well, you're
You'll
talking
notice a
maybe
lot of,
3 years before it turns into half of what it was, right?
well, incredibly, yeah. Because of pharmacology, I was under the impression when I first learned this that it would take 5 half-lives to get them out of your body. But there is a paper that showed that if you do all the math, the authors figured this out. This was decades ago. They figured out that you can you can overturn all of your fatty acids in 3 years, even though the half-life is 600 to 680 days of these fatty acids. So that's kind of good and bad news. The good news is that you'll eventually get there. The bad news is it might take you 3 years, to completely get your fats in your body down to ancestral levels, was what I call it, because they're
Mm.
extremely high today.
Incredible, incredible. It's right now, what I'm doing is I'm trying to trying to broaden my educational materials to the average person on the street, to
Mhm.
get them aware of what they're eating. So we have a whole simple campaign to uh, get people to start reading labels. So we go in their pantry, we go in their their refrigerator, and we get them. First of all, we teach them, how to identify at least three things in this junk food, the synthetic sugars, synthetic starches, and the seed oils.
Hmm.
And then we go to the grocery store,
Hmm.
and then we start reading labels. And it's interesting. It takes, quite a few of those labels before they all of a sudden they get it and they go, wow, I've never even read a label before. And they're just looking around amazed for the first time. They're recognizing that it's hard to find quality food in the grocery store, which is a huge step up.
Yeah.
Because they didn't even know that they didn't even know. But then a month later, we just come back and we interview them. Once they have some key knowledge on that, it's like they're not going back because they feel so much better. The inflammation goes down when you
Exactly.
start cutting out the seed oils. I
Right.
mean,
And I hadn't really thought about this till this moment, but one of the easiest ways to get seed oils out of your diet is just not to buy anything that has a label. I mean, if you buy meats,
mm,
eggs, essentially, I guess dairy, cheese, but all the fruits and vegetables, all those, a whole lot of those things don't come with labels, right? And so those are the
right.
things that really wouldn't have any vegetable oils because they're not processed.
That would be an easy way. I like that. That's real
Yeah,
simple.
that would.
Just
Yeah, that would. It
no
might make it
labels.
pretty simple for most. If they just think, first of all, all natural foods are never going to have seed oils. So this is why the all of the hunter gatherer type populations who never have seed oils in their diet. Of course, they also don't have sugar or refined flours, but they never have obesity. They have no diabetes, no heart disease, almost no cancer. Right? Their health is just extraordinary.
Now you brought up another question I have. So if you're let's just take, I don't know, 1 teaspoon of this.
Hmm.
How many seeds does it take to make 1 teaspoon? I mean, I'm sure it's not 1 to 1. There's not a lot of
Yeah.
oil in these seeds.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Eric, I can't remember those numbers, but
Okay.
it would be. I know people, maybe you've even done it, talked about how many ears of corn it takes to make a tablespoon or so of corn oil, and it's extraordinary.
I'm going to do a video on that. I think that would be an interesting topic. I did recently search out how much it costs to buy a metric ton of dent corn, which is inedible,
Hmm.
field corn.
Oh,
And that's basically what ends up in all of our food. Um, you can right now, actually, as of last month anyway, you could buy it for $198 a metric ton of corn,
wow.
which then can produce, I think it was up to almost 7,000 boxes of cornflakes. So the profitability on corn, because it's subsidized, is so great. I mean, what a great business to get into if you have an evil purpose, because it's just so bad. And I think also, I mean, they can make also starches and then oil. It's like
Right.
you could just turn that into anything. But I don't know when I look at corn, and I just even envisioning chewing corn, I don't see a lot of oil coming out of there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
No, you wouldn't.
I,
In 2014, I looked at the data on the cost of seed oils globally, and it averaged exactly $1 per kilo per 1,000 grams of seed oil. So I did the math. So again, since we were consuming 80 grams of seed oils in 2010, and it's really similar since then. It's really close to that. That 80 grams would cost, if it's soybean oil, which is the most popular oil in the United States by far, that would cost processed food manufacturers 5.6 cents. That's why they use it. If they were to use butter instead, it would cost 36 cents. So it's about 6 times more costly to put butter in a product, which would make it healthy, than it would to put in seed oils. So if you think about it, like, to make Pop Tarts, you need you need vegetable oil, refined flour, and sugar, right? And
right.
for 10 cents, they probably can make Pop Tarts that cost $3 or $4, and that's what processed food is no matter where you look, whether it's whether it's pizza or Pop Tarts or chips, they're all containing a lot of the same ingredients: refined flour, sugars, and seed oils.
You pay three times. You pay taxpayers. You pay certain farmers to grow that crop. So you just paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you buy the product, and then you have to pay the doctor for all the side effects you get from it. So it might sound like you're saving money, but I don't think you are saving money.
No, I really think that if you spend the extra money to get healthy food free of processed foods in the first place, it definitely will cost you a bit more. I don't know exactly what that number would be, but it'll cost you more than the same caloric content for processed foods for certain. But I think in the end, it could save you 1,000-fold. I'm making up that number, but when I look at people that what's being spent at the end of life with heart disease and cancer care and autoimmune disease care, it's so common for these people to have bills that are beyond $20,000 a month to take care of them, right?
You're an ophthalmologist. You studied the eye, and this is probably you got well, I know this, you got interested in the seed oils just from looking at macular problems, right? Is that how you stumbled on
really it was the other way around. I really started looking at processed foods and all this chronic disease. That was where I was back in 2013, about 11 years ago. And then that year, Eric, I did hypothesize just to myself that possibly processed foods might also be driving age-related macular degeneration, AMD, the leading cause of irreversible vision loss and blindness in people over the age of 50 worldwide. And I ultimately did leave practice to pursue that very question, to pursue the research on that. And we looked at data in 25 nations, and every single nation, the data completely supported the hypothesis that it's mostly vegetable oils and probably sugar and refined flour, the processed foods, driving macular degeneration. But the overwhelming I'll say cause, I use the term loosely, because I hate to use just association or correlation, because we all want to know what the cause is, right? And I think so. I would say the cause is the vegetable oils, and that's why eventually then I just came back to my roots, which was start looking at this in relation to obesity and metabolic disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and all this, right? And so that's kind of where I've been over the last 6 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating. This is awesome. So I'm definitely going to recommend everyone get this book right here. I'll put a link down below, because this is like the Bible of seed oils. Everything you want to know about it, but it's just fascinating. All the data. I don't know how you compile this data, because this is a major project. I'll do a video. I know what it takes to put into one video, but you did this masterpiece. It's like this is like a work of art. Just the amount of data and correlation and research. I don't know how you did it, but I'm glad you did it. And so now it's all summarized for someone.
Yeah, well, I'm a data junkie. I just kind of live and die by data. I figure that, data is where data doesn't tell you the answers, but it leads you to the answers, I think, as if it's good data. And so I think it's just extremely important to paint these pictures for all of us, because I learn from it too. And I'm just like everybody else. I just want to know what are the right answers? What are the true answers? Mm-hmm. You do that every day in your work, Eric. But I've been working on this for about 13 years now, and I just love trying to figure it out. I just like the investigation, and I want to bring this knowledge to the people.
You isolated something that I really think is the key to the whole thing. So you stumbled on something really big, and we just need to get the word out. So hopefully this video will be seen by many people, and hopefully shared by many as well.
That'd be great, Eric. Thanks a million.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.